From all of us here at Insight Myanmar podcast, we'd like to welcome you to this virtual art auction. Your support and your presence here today means so much to us, and of course, even more importantly, to the Burmese communities that you're supporting. I would like to take a moment to express my full appreciation for these wonderful artists from around the world who have shared their creation for this event. From music to photography, from handicrafts to painting, from dance to the digital realm, you've provided the best that you have to offer, and we thank you for that. First, let us also take a moment to reflect on our contemporaries in Myanmar, where we know there has long been a thriving art scene. And today, these very artists have been at the forefront of the protest movement, as their voice and vision gives inspiration to the resistance. They're creating at a pace and with a raw intensity like never before. And never has their role been so vital, nor their freedom so constricted. Today in Myanmar, artistic ability is no protection against a terror state, and celebrity of any kind is far more a liability than a protection these days. Yet even with these risks, Burmese artists are not backing down, and their courage to continue producing their craft, even under these conditions, is something we can only regard with awe. So to those artists contributing in today's auction, I thank you for using your freedom and safety to create and share on behalf of your Burmese brothers and sisters, and for your willingness to stand in solidarity with those fellow artists that are not safe and whose very work puts them at risk. Now, a brief word for all you prospective buyers and virtual window shoppers. Welcome. Thank you for coming to check out this scene. Merely the act of staying informed and bearing witness is so important at this time. I know how busy many of us are, and just the fact that you have decided to spend part of your day browsing this art and contemplating what it represents, it indicates a concern and a willingness to engage, and I thank you for that. Terror thrives in the shadows, and believe me, the generals are hoping that we will all soon get tired of this story and just get on with our lives. Your presence here today is a tacit agreement to keep this story in your hearts. Please continue to educate yourself on what's happening in Myanmar, and for anyone interested in audio interviews, I invite you to take a listen to our recent episodes from Inside Myanmar podcast. Finally, for those of you bidding on the art, a heartfelt thank you. I'm happy that you'll manage to get not only a beautiful, but also a meaningful piece of art. But I'm even more grateful that these cumulative funds will go towards those communities in Myanmar in such great need at the moment. The proceeds from this art auction will be dispersed widely to help many, not limited to region, background, ethnicity, or religion. It will go to support those civil servants refusing to work as part of the Civil Disobedience Movement, or CDM, as well as to purchase medical supplies, bring food to impoverished areas, support families of those murdered on the street, help print materials encouraging defection from the military, and much, much more. And to those who did not make a winning bid on one piece of art, I invite you to consider offering a donation, which will be applied to the same fund. The window of freedom is still open just a crack in Myanmar, but it's closing fast. At this moment, everything we do matters. Every action, every engagement, every donation. Whatever we can do to maintain the momentum and increase morale keeps the Burmese people free for one day more. Thank you.
My guest today is Mimi A, a noted Myanmar food writer in the UK who opens up to us about the role of food in connecting to and experiencing culture, the complexities of growing up with dual identities, and the role of art in revolution and social progress. So you grew up very much as Burmese, but you grew up in the United Kingdom, sort of straddling different cultures, one foot in the Burmese identity, one foot in the UK identity. Can you tell us a little bit about what that's like and how you relate to those different parts of your past and your identity?
It's difficult. It's a bit like feeling like you don't know who you are a lot of the time. I mean, I'm in my 40s now, and I still kind of, on any given day, if someone says, "Are you Burmese? Are you British?" I'm not entirely sure what the answer should be or is. I mean, a lot of that was obviously dictated by the fact that my parents, even now, even though they're in their 70s, are still convinced that we'll all go back to Burma, to Myanmar, and live there as one big happy family. We were the only people from their family who, left the country. And ever since I was little, it was where we spent most of our summers, going back to see my grandparents, going to see my aunts and uncles and my many, many cousins. And it was just something where I felt like it was normal to be in two different worlds and to switch from one language to the other. But sometimes, the boundaries blur. And sometimes I'd be at school here and I'd realize that I wouldn't know how to express myself in English because it was a concept that only afterwards I realized only existed in Burmese. And so I'd be like, what's that word that means this? And then I'd describe it using many, many words to one of my school chums. And that school chum would say, we don't do that in English, or that's not a concept we have here. So it's not even kind of vocab or culture. It's even concepts that would get muddled and mixed up and, be quite fluid, I guess.
I mean, definitely sympathetic. I assume Anade is a slightly difficult concept to capture in English.
That's definitely one of the primary ones. I mean, even recently on social media, I was having a conversation with a whole bunch of people, some of whom are Burmese, some of whom are not, but all of them knew the idea of Anade because they had connections to Myanmar. And we were trying to settle on how we would describe it. And I think we finally came up with feeling obliged. But even that, it just doesn't quite capture the nuance, So
yeah, I always said preemptive guilt at inconveniencing someone.
Yes, that exactly. It's a good thing. It's like sometimes you just want to go, like there's a German word that means that exact concept, but the German word only has 2 syllables. I want that.
Quite logical. But so speaking of mouthfuls, food is clearly important to you. I mean, you run a food blog. So growing up, I presume much of the fare at home would have been traditional Burmese food.
Yeah, I mean, so when I was growing up here in the UK, we used to get power cuts quite a lot. Nothing like you'd get in Burma, obviously. So, but every so often, I think it was just the electricity board just being terrible. And so you'd have like the whole street would go out, but the next street over would be fine. And I used to quite enjoy that because it was the only time we got to have fish and chips, because otherwise my mum was that classic, I can cook better than that. I can do that at home. So we would either have Burmese food or a Burmese version of a Western dish. So like, even if we had pizza, my mum would cover it in like dried fish and chilies and garlic. And so everything had that Burmese twist, which is great. But at the same time, I really wanted to just have some McDonald's, So.
Did you have ngapi at home or?
Oh yeah, definitely. No. Ngapi is definitely very important. I mean, there's this kind of saying that you can't be properly Burmese if you don't like ngapi. So.
And I mean that's a really important point. So you clearly identify very strongly as Burmese, and you've clearly kept all of these sorts of trappings. So food, would you agree that food is a very important element of identity? It's a very important way to connect with identity and preserve it and carry it on to the next generation.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think food is probably the last thing that people lose a lot of the time. I have friends who are not Burmese, but from different cultures, who say that the one connection they have with their family and their heritage is the cuisine, because it's a relatively easy, but also it's something that like fires all your senses. Your sense of taste, your sense of smell, very, very nostalgic, very triggering. People talk about how their grandmother used to make this dish for them, and that's their last memory of their grandmother. So yeah, no, food is just incredibly powerful for whatever reason. And, they go on about how breaking bread with people is something, is the way to come to a truce, to actually. So here's one thing. So in the last book I wrote, I wrote a Burmese cookbook, and I talked about the significance of lepet being, the pickled tea. And lepet used to be used to broker truces between warring kingdoms in Burma. So you would literally get like the leader of one kingdom, another kingdom, sitting down and sharing lepet, just to say, actually, we are no longer at war. So yeah, food is important at every kind of level of life.
I mean, it really does transport you in a way. I mean, the way I think you captured it, it's nostalgic. And it's sort of like you can look at family photos and you can say, I see myself in this photograph, but I have no memory of this event. I don't know who these people are. But suddenly you can smell something or you can taste something. And even though you don't know how it connects, your brain immediately tells you this was significant to you sometime. And this is familiar and it is important. And I agree, it really overpowers senses that we don't respect enough.
And I mean, it doesn't even be food. It can be like connected to food. So there is this one smell that I really strongly associate with Mogo, which is my mother's hometown, which is near the Shan State. And basically it is the scent of bonfires. And it's very funny because, like, in this country, obviously, because I'm in the UK, when other people smell bonfires, they think of fireworks night. They think of Guy Fawkes and all that. Whereas I think of traveling in a dilapidated old Jeep up to the mountains to my mother's hometown, because what we do is we'd stop off at like a little kind of mountainside stall, and they'd have all kind of soups and noodles and just a big bonfire. Like, it was all charcoal and you could just smell everything burning. And that scent, as soon as it hits my nostrils, all I can think of is Mogo and my mum's hometown. So yeah, it's very, very powerful.
And, Mogo itself has seen a lot of very heavy fighting since the coup. There have been some really horrific episodes that have taken place there. And you clearly still have very strong connections to the country, and you have very emotional connections, but also family connections, personal connections. So in that context, how do you respond to those voices who say that people who have left the country and are no longer living in the country don't really have the right to have an equal say in how the democracy movement should move forward in the current context?
I mean, well, equal say, definitely. I agree with them. I don't think we do have an equal say because we're not on the ground. We're not personally affected by what's happening. However, if you still have family and friends there, as I do, as many people do, I think it's only fair that we get to say something about what's happening, because apart from anything else, it kind of makes you a bit of a monster if you don't care about what's happening to your own people. I understand that a lot of people have kept quiet for the reason that they're afraid that it would endanger family and friends that are still in Burma. I mean, that's absolutely fair and right, because, you don't want to, it's okay for us to put our heads above the parapet here. But if that means that they can connect you to, an aunt, an uncle, a brother or a sister, or, someone on the ground, and they end up going to prison because you've said something, then obviously, yes, I understand that completely. On the other hand, if there's stuff that you can say that might make a difference to the people on the ground, then I think you have to, even if it's things like sharing a petition, saying, please, can you ask the UN to recognize the national unity government? This is something that we can do that people in Burma, in Myanmar, can't necessarily, especially when from about the start of the coup to about, 7-8 months later, the regime was literally shutting down internet access. So they were kind of cutting communication, thrusting the people in the country into darkness. And so it's not even that we have a right to say something outside the country. I kind of feel like we have a duty to say something because we're the only people that can. But God forbid that we, supplant the voices within the country, because obviously they're the ones that matter. They're the most important. But, for example, I've been given the opportunity a couple of times to write pieces for Time magazine. And when they asked me, would you like to write about what's happening over in Myanmar, I made it very clear that I was not doing it as someone who was an expert. I wasn't doing it as someone who knew what was happening on the ground. I was doing it as someone outside the country, using whatever kind of background, history, emotions that I have as a member of the diaspora. And that's what they would be getting. And I wanted to make that really clear. And, they were happy for me to do that. And that's what I did. So yeah, no, I think if you're a member of the diaspora and you can make a difference, I think you do have a duty to try. But at the same time, yeah, we shouldn't be replacing or, centering ourselves in this fight, because it's not our fight that we can actually, take part in directly.
Absolutely. And I think you've touched on a very important element there. I mean, there are so many things that, although there are people on the ground in the country who are fighting very hard in many different ways and putting themselves at significant risk, there are many things that they cannot do. So, for example, raising money and raising awareness, it's something that is reasonably difficult to achieve if you don't have a sizable platform, if you don't speak dominant languages of the West, if you don't have access to a lot of even just the financial amenities that we have in the West. So with that in mind, I want to move on to the role that something reasonably simple can play in fighting against dictatorship and fighting for freedom. Because, as you pointed out, people can be in danger just for speaking. Words have power, and the military recognizes this. That is why they come down on people who speak out against them. And I think one of the unsung heroes of revolution and of subversion and of societal progress is art, realistically. Now, do you have any thoughts on the role that art has played historically in Burmese society and culture in pushing for progress and fighting against oppression?
I mean, the military has had a long history of suppressing artistic creation, of suppressing anything that might be seen as sedition. We're very used to censorship in Myanmar. All the books that you had in the country, if they were from abroad, they were generally smuggled in. I remember my parents taking stuff in their suitcases written by, Western minds, or even not even Western minds, but Burmese people that would be viewed as dangerous within Myanmar. So they would take these books and they would smuggle them, and they'd be passed around and they'd be photocopied. And, it was very much a situation where if you wanted to discuss stuff, even stuff that was like a metaphor for what was happening, you had to be very careful and guarded in how you spoke. My family is a family of writers within Myanmar itself. One of my great aunts was Ludu Dorma, who was a famous writer and dissident, and she and her husband had both been political prisoners because they had spoken out and written stuff that had been deemed dissident and anti-government or anti-junta. And I remember that my great aunt actually said near her retirement, I guess, she was kind of fed up of the fact that everything was so censored and controlled, and she'd been pushed into a position where she was having to write fiction, and folk tales and about stuff that was deemed safe and proper, and wouldn't get her thrown into prison as an old lady, So yeah, this is just something that has always been worrying. There are kind of pop bands and rock bands who've had to put out two versions of their songs because the lyrics in one version were deemed anti-government, anti-junta. So it's a fine line that's been trod for decades, basically. And so yeah, no, it's art has always been something that's been there to try and inspire people and, keep people's spirits up, even when, there wasn't a full blown kind of fighting and oppression happens right this moment. It's always been something that people have been, passing around in the shadows and worried about because it might be considered something that, would get you thrown out or imprisoned.
I mean, absolutely. And I think it's not just, being exiled or being imprisoned. As you've mentioned before, I mean, there are very serious consequences for subversive art, for writing or for criticizing the government. I mean, people, as you've pointed out before, people have been killed for this, very literally.
So there were three poets who were all shot, Keizawin, Jilian, and Getty. They were all poets, very powerful poets who have all been murdered by the military junta in this current revolution.
And I mean, it's harrowing. I mean, this revolution has been going on for a little bit more than 10 months now, not even a full year. And the death toll itself is so high, but that within that time, they set aside time and effort to hunt down artists because the words intimidate them so much and because they understand the potential power that words have.
Words and pictures, because these are the things that can be disseminated across the country and also from outside the country. This is the stuff that they try to contain in little boxes, but they can't, what's more powerful than an image? Or we mentioned Mogo, my mother's hometown. One of the things that I was kind of overwhelmed by is the fact that we're talking about professional artists, but we're also talking about people who may never have engaged in this kind of creativity before. But, in Mogo, they did kind of like a human display. They spelt out the word CDM Mogo using their bodies. So like the whole town, the whole hometown, there was an aerial shot of them kind of sending this message out to the rest of the world. And other things that have been happening, again, across the country, but also the diaspora have been trying to support, is all these kind of strikes that they've been doing, specifically artistic strikes. So you'd had Flower Strike in Myanmar, which was where people held up the three-finger salute, but they were holding like a floral display of some sort. Or, even things like the Leaf Strike, when that was kind of around about Green Day Strike, I think it was, where people wrote their messages on like big banana leaves and palm leaves. And again, it was kind of, and even, we're talking about food. There was a food strike where there's a New Year dish called molong yebo, which is like the kind of rice balls in jaggery. And people were using these rice balls to create pictures of the three-finger salute or create messages saying we need support or save Myanmar using food, So these displays are obviously incredibly eye-catching. The picture tells 1,000 words, right? And so I was seeing it everywhere. I was seeing it being shared by people who I didn't even knew where Burma even is, because it spreads so widely and so powerfully that people are struck by imagery. And this is what the military is terrified of, the fact that imagery, poetry, art is so powerful, it can spread so wide, and they can't contain it, and they want to contain it.
Absolutely. And that's really what I wanted to talk about here is the role that art plays in the current revolution. And I think there is something to be said for the art of the 88 revolution. We see, for example, a lot of the songs that are being sung are songs from the 88 revolution. Gbamjeu by Myanmar is being sung at so many martyrs' funerals, for example. So that's. Do you have any thoughts on the continuation of that legacy?
Yeah, I mean, it's not surprising because the whole thing is a cycle, isn't it? I've lost track. Is it 3-4 coups now? And it's like the generations are being hit by the same nightmare, and so the things that we pass on, the things at the end. I mean, in 88, I was 9 years old. And so, I was not in the country, but I saw from the outside what was happening. I've heard since then from my family what happened. And it's, as you say, the same songs are inspiring people, but, there are new songs that are coming out as well. And these songs are just, just, you have that thing where people, even in their final moments, are kind of humming these tunes in defiance. And I'm just in so much awe.
I mean, we're in a new world. I mean, on the one hand, it is a horrendous reality that children today know the revolutionary songs of 1988. Those songs should have died with a successful revolution in 1988. Unfortunately, they're being recycled because the cause is ongoing. Hopefully this will be the last iteration. But, we live now in a digital world that didn't exist in 1988. We live in a world of memes. We live in a world of digital art. We live in a world where so many different platforms can be utilized for these emotive, powerful, expressive pieces. And there are some phenomenally talented and creative and imaginative artists who are using every
People
platform.
are using TikToks. There are Myanmar TikToks. I mean, I think the Myanmar as a hashtag, there's like 1 billion, I think, on TikTok. And people, creators who until now have been using it to like show makeup tutorials or, like mukbang, which is that thing where people just watch people gorge themselves on food. They've pivoted. They're using, they're one of my favorite fashion bloggers. Oh dear God! She posted a pictorial tutorial. Sorry, not trying to rhyme here. Showing the best ways to run to avoid being shot, which is shocking and terrifying, but also, oh my God, people really are. All these artists really are using their platforms. Where once she'd been posting beautiful like sarongs and hairstyles, and which is art in itself, she was now showing diagrams on how to run in a zigzag fashion to avoid a sniper, which kind of made me want to cry.
I mean, it is horrendous. Although running in zigzag to avoid a sniper, there are some problems with that as well. But
I'm sure.
moving on from that, but moving on from, but that's absolutely that's a thing. Like so many platforms that were not taken seriously. Nobody thinks of Twitter, as a serious thing. But when there's a revolution, when there's public action, these can connect all the way to the West.
Well,
Black Lives Matter was the same.
The Twitter thing, that's extraordinary. So, I mean, as some people, I mean, as I'm sure you're aware, Facebook was the internet for Myanmar. And then the military shut down Facebook thinking, haha, we've got you there. And then, everyone suddenly flooded Instagram and Twitter and TikTok and, all these platforms that they'd never used before. And there were Telegram channels, Telegram again being a new thing, training people how to use hashtags, training people how to get things to trend. And in fact, actually right now, there's a bit of a scandal going on because Instagram has suppressed the What's Happening in Myanmar hashtag, which is probably the primary hashtag used for disseminating updates and getting information out there.
Because that's quite global. We use that on Facebook, we use that on Twitter, we use it everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. And so, but that hashtag is currently being hidden by Instagram. And yeah, so there's been a lot of people kicking off about that at the moment. But this is the thing, right? People have been adapting. They've been moving from one medium to another and adopting it in such kind of creative ways and such amazing ways, Yeah, it's so inspiring to me.
It's not just the creativity for me; it's the speed.
Yes,
frankly, because back if we go, I mean, internet access and all those things, we could say really probably started around 2010, but they didn't hit critical mass until quite a bit later than that. I think 2017 was the peak of telephone purchases. The telephone purchases in Myanmar, I think in 2017 surpassed even China. And so we saw memes, but the memes that were being created were basically Western memes, English language memes that were translated to Burmese. And that was probably still the reality in 2019. Now we have genuinely new, unique Burmese context memes that take effort to translate and explain to a Western audience because they're so separated. Like the speed at which the community, the Burmese community, has found ways to utilize and exploit and change and customize these platforms to create a genuinely Burmese, unique cultural expression is phenomenal. Like, it is head-spinningly fast. And it's still changing. It's still evolving every day. New things are coming
Yeah,
out.
completely. You know, there's loads of memes accounts, can't say it, that I follow on both Facebook and Instagram, and yeah, it's just like the comedy is just incredible, and it really is something where it is hard to explain. Like, I think there was one famous example that I think was actually explored on this podcast, where they were talking about the Myanmar, the husband and wife crispy cakes, and how there were signs being put up by truck drivers saying we don't want to go back to the Myanmar roads, and how you had to explain that means kind of roads full of potholes because you have a pan that looks like potholes to make this snack. But you know, you're having to take 5 steps to explain what it actually means. But it, you know, to a Burmese person, you look at that and you go, yeah, you're right. We don't want those roads. So.
I remember that. That was actually me being interviewed on that particular episode.
Okay.
Yeah, how we come full circle. But the reason that we did that particular one, was the genesis for that sort of entire Facebook page, because it was so poignant in Burmese and so obvious to everyone who understands not just the language, but the culture and the history. They just looked at it and they laughed. And the explanation that was required to get that through to an outsider was like 5 minutes of solid history lessons. It was ridiculous. Like it legitimately took like someone explaining it to me in multiple voice messages, sending me pictures, explaining each step as we go. And then I explained that to my friend. I'm like, oh my God, have you seen this? This is so ridiculous. I explained it to him. It took me 5 minutes to explain it. He just messaged me back going, okay, that is absolutely insane. Like, that is ridiculous. I can understand why this is fascinating to you and why you want to start sort of diving deeply into these. And it really blew my mind. It really blew my mind to have that form of expression.
I mean, there was another one that was going around, and this is something that I actually had to, I learned relatively recently, because obviously I'm not in the country, and so I don't necessarily know up-to-date slang. And I didn't realize that jiantou, which means to put ginger, I guess literally, it's kind of a weird thing to say, means to be useless. And that's a relatively modern part of slang. And then there was this thing going around where someone had recreated the UN logo using ginger. And obviously, if you're a hip Burmese person, which I am not, as soon as you see that, you go, yeah, that's a really good joke. The UN symbol being recreated in ginger. But like loads of other people were like, what does this mean? What does this mean? It's kind of...
Yes, that threw me for a loop as well. My understanding was it comes from some movie.
Sorry?
Like apparently, I think it came from some comedy movie that came out a few years ago, and one of the characters
probably
was called Ginger, but he's this absolute good for nothing. And from there, it became like, my understanding is that's the origin. I might be wrong, but yeah, all of these. But they're so beautiful and so poignant and so effective. Those things that if you're in the culture, and it's not just language, it's culture. You're in the culture, you look at it, boom, got it. And if you're an outsider, it's like, all right, sit down. We're going to have to go through a couple of steps here, and we're going to walk you through this. It really is incredible. It's amazing. But it's the spirit of it to me as well.
Well, it's the gallows humor. It's the thing where, when there were kind of bombs being set off in Yangon, I think it was, and there was a video of it, and then there was like one whole kind of battery of explosions going off, and then suddenly you had all those voices going, Happy New Year, which is, a joke that works in English as well. So.
But it was like the comments, because I remember posting that video. It was really doing the rounds on social media. And it was the comments that came back were just aghast. They were just like, the balls on these people, that they're just like, all right, bombs are coming in. What are you going to do? Like this is normal. And I think people, that one really stopped a couple of people. Like, the jokes were funny. And then you see a video of people just dealing with the reality of grenades and rockets. And you just go like, oh my God, this isn't funny. Like, this is a very real situation. These people are just coping as best as they can.
Well, that's the thing. Because if you don't laugh, you're going to cry. So,
I mean, it is truly horrendous. But of course, that sort of sets us up here. Obviously, we have to talk about it because that is sort of what is going on at the moment. So we've got an art auction coming up in New York, and we have, again, this beautiful representation of a very real and tangible way in which Myanmar artists can use the power of art itself simultaneously to raise awareness and to perform advocacy, but also to raise funds that are desperately needed for people who have been displaced, people whose crops have been destroyed, and people who have had to just flee the country because the military literally, they know no bounds. Every day we're seeing more and more evidence of that. Do you have any comments on the art auction itself or the artists themselves?
I think I'm just kind of in awe that people are able to translate what is basically horror into something that's kind of beautiful. I don't mean beautiful in a bad and like kind of like a positive, happy way, but in a way that it kind of put it this way. One of the things that I always admire about art is the fact that it's a way of getting a message to people without turning them off. And I'm not an artist, but this is something that I've tried to do even when I've shared information or posted imagery on my own accounts. And that's the fact that, so, at the moment, obviously, there's been one nightmare after another, one piece of horror after another, because the military, they know no mercy. And the latest thing that they've done is that they've, set fire to people's bodies. And so there have been images and videos of people's charred bodies going around social media. And
as a correction, those people were not dead when they were set on fire. The most recent ones were alive when they were burned.
Yeah, I believe that's the case. I'm not entirely sure. And so it's just the most unimaginable horror. And this has obviously been passed around and around. But the thing is, for a lot of people, that will make them turn off. It will make them switch off. It will make them go, I don't want to think about this anymore. I don't want to deal with this. And the thing about art is that you can convey what's happening without presenting people with, the real thing, if that makes sense. And so it is such an important medium to get a message across without making people turn the page, without making people switch off their TV sets, without making people put their phones down. You can still have the impact. It's not sanitized, but it has the same impact, but without... There's that, I hesitate to use the word beauty again, but there's the translating it into a medium that's kind of a step removed. So it's not sanitized at all. It can be just as devastating to witness, just as devastating to view. But it's that difference between people looking and absorbing and understanding and people just turning away.
Yes. And I think it's also the way that the medium works. You can see, when it's an image, when it's a poster, when it's a painting, you can not only translate an emotion, and that's very powerful. There are certain paintings, Picasso's Weeping Woman comes to mind. You don't need to analyze the painting. You can see the grief of a mother whose son has just died, right? You can see biting down on her kerchief and crying. That's an emotion that is immediately translatable and understandable, regardless of culture, regardless of background. And all it takes is a glimpse. All it takes is a look at the piece, and you are connected. So I understand you don't want to use the word beauty, but I think we can say that these pieces are captivating. There's something about them that connects with us because we feel it, and we feel it faster than that part of our brain that says, I don't want to engage with this. I don't want this to be my problem. Too late. Like, this is happening.
Exactly.
You can't ignore it.
It's got under your skin.
This is going on. Yes. And that's a good thing. It needs to.
It is a good thing. Yeah.
because 54 million Burmese people can't just walk away from it. That's the reality.
Because that's the other thing, actually. So, when it is just a news report, when it is just like a photo, part of you can become numb to it all. And the whole point about art is that it's the opposite. It fires you up, you can't be numb to art,
There's no apathy there. There's no exhaustion there. It's novel, but it is still just as powerful the first time as the fifth time, as the 100th time. It truly does sort of, I think this is what I'm coming back to all the time, is that art tries to distill the human experience and get rid of all the clutter and just translate human experience to a human being and draw you in. And it does that so much more effectively than someone dryly reading out statistics and facts or just showing you shocking photographs after shocking photographs. Like those are somehow never as effective as a poem, even, or a song, or a rendering. They're just really apposite ways of translating large-scale horror down to something that even a single human being can understand and can empathize with. So that, all that being said, we're on a little bit of a down note at the moment, but this has been a very enjoyable conversation, a very edifying conversation. I think it's gone in some really interesting ways. Would you like to leave us with any final thoughts on any of the things that we've discussed today?
I guess there are two things that really strike me. The first is that, we were talking about songs being handed down and stories, and, I think it's really important that people remember, but I'm hoping in the not too distant future, these will just become folk tales, and we will remember and we will sing, but it won't be because we're mourning what's happening right now. And in that respect, I hope that these artworks, these songs, these poems will become beautiful, and in the kind of the pure way of beauty, as in something that we can appreciate without it being tinged with, sadness and horror. And then the other thing, I guess, is I mentioned that my great aunt was Ludu Doama. I think something that she said once in an interview is something that I continue to try and bear in mind, and I think everyone else should as well, which is, she said that for those of us who don't dance to the tune of the authorities, we must be creative in what we write to get the message across. And I think that holds true for whatever medium, whether you write, whether you paint, whether you sing. Just keep being creative and keep everyone on their toes, because it is that which keeps everyone else going, but it keeps you as the artist going. So yeah, just keep going, everybody.
We have with us a very special guest today, Dr. Sasa himself, the Minister for International Cooperation within the National Unity Government. He shares with us his thoughts on art and outlines the importance of today's event and the importance of raising awareness among the international community to help the long-suffering Myanmar people. Dr. Sasa, many people in the West have a very particular idea of what art is, but Myanmar art is quite different, and different ethnic groups and different cultures have different types of art and artistic expression. Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of art to identity and to culture for Myanmar people?
Well, let me state first that Myanmar is multi-ethnic country, multi-religious country, multi-society country. So there's multi-languages and ethnicities and cultures and arts. And so even the food and even the way how we dress, even the way our clothes and graffiti, all these are unique way. It's not all about art of the beauty. It's itself is about the beauty of the culture in which we have been living. And also, Myanmar is the country of, like, I used to compare gardens. It's a big, massive garden. That means that there's not only one type of flower. There's so many varieties of flowers flowering in a beautiful garden. So Myanmar as a country itself is arts country. It is the diversity, is diverse, very diverse country in the way, even languages. There's so many languages. Example, in the Chin, for where I came from, we have at least more than 50 spoken languages. At the same time, 50 more than colorful dresses and arts that each displays the identity of the tribes. But again, it is the military generals in Myanmar for so long. They have a policy. It's terror policy. That is Burmanization. That is called Buddhistization. So they want to see one race, one culture, and it is again, they have been using that as weapons. So whenever you see the military generals in Myanmar talk about the politics, they will always say protection of race and religious. That means Brahmanization and Buddhistization. So that is the two policy that many people in Myanmar are aware of, know already, but maybe I don't think so that outside world know about it that much. And they want to destroy the rest of the culture by discriminating against. And they want to destroy all other languages by discriminating, even necessarily using force to bow down in front of their policy. But we have been standing up for unity in diversity. So in another word, these culture, these arts are the strength to the nation of Myanmar. And these arts, this identity, these beautiful ethnicities, these beautiful languages, culture, and variety and diversities are really the greatest strength of Myanmar as a country. Instead of appreciating the beauty of each culture, the beauty of each languages, and there's really beauty lie on that identities. But this is the military generals that have agenda and a policy of destroying all those beauty. But we are determined to build the beauty again from the ashes of the destructions of the Tamador for 5 decades.
Excellent. And I think it's very important the way that you say that the military engages in Burmanization, it engages in Buddhistization, trying to eliminate these other types of identity. But what we've seen is art being used to fight back against the military, to fight back against Burmanization, to fight back against Buddhistization, to fight back against dictatorship. Can you tell us whether you see art as being an important tool in this conflict against the February coup?
Just an example, this Spring Revolution, what is the symbol that were displayed across the nations? 3 figure salutes. Yeah, this itself is displacement of arts, using arts against tyranny, using 3 figure salute as a symbolic, as anti-coup, as anti-military junta. And it's a very effective way of using of the 3 figure salute as arts against tyranny. So I never see any country in the world using these arts of creativity. And to me, I think art is all about identity itself, but also it's about creativity. So the way they all this protest, peaceful protesting, it's all so much about showing live arts in many ways. Example, the young people, Generation Z, they they want to stop the military vehicle coming to the protesters, and they want to stop the police forces, but they don't have the way of doing it because the police are too. They have got too much weapons. They will destroy. They will kill them. Instead, they use like potato, or they use like onions on the road. I saw them in the video file. They throw the potato on the streets and they cut it, they brought it back, put it back again to the basket. And it's all, to me, it's just stunning, amazing, in a way of displaying arts against tyranny. And at the same time, there's a campaign of rose flower. There was the day when the Aung San Suu Kyi's birthday. There was the whole nation bring a rose, and there was a rose protest against tyranny. So it's all so much about people display arts against tyranny, and at the same time, if you listen the music of our great artists in Myanmar, so much is about the sounds and the poem that is written against the brutality of the military junta and the hope of federal democracy, the hope for freedom. So these displacements and a lot of arts drawing or arts displacing, it's so much about, in a way, very effective use of art against tyranny. So I think that the topic that we are discussing today is a very much fit to the people of Myanmar using the creativity, identity arts, creativity of arts to against the military rules in Myanmar.
I agree. And I think the examples that you've brought up are very useful and very important examples, not only because they're creative, but also because these are non-violent ways to fight back against violence. These are people fighting a military through peaceful means. And as you say, we've seen very, very, very great creativity in this through music and through flowers and through paintings. Do you think that there's a message here for protesters and for the people who are fighting for democracy about the power of peace and the power of love over violence and hatred?
It is clear. I mean, peace is always much, much more powerful than violence. Always. Always. And again, non-violence is always much, much more powerful than violence. So, I mean, if you just simple experiment or displacement of the situation now is just look at the other side of Myanmar, where the military generals in Burma are using all-out violence against the people of Myanmar. And this side, the artists, the beautiful people of Myanmar, and the most peaceful people in Myanmar, displacing non-violence against the violence. So I think this non-violence movement of arts against tyranny is much more powerful than the military act of terrorism against the people of Myanmar. As the light is much more powerful than the darknesses. As the love is much, much more powerful than hatreds. As non-violence is much more powerful than violence. As peace is much more powerful than, again, this crime against humanity. So it's all there for the world to see. And it's all for the people of Myanmar to see. Of course, again, if we talk in political terms, freedom will always be much more powerful than tyranny. So, in a sense, military dictatorship have no place. Actually, they have no place. They are, they're struggling to creep onto power, and it has been 10 months since they took the country power by force, not by election, not by choice, but by using battlefield weapons. They took away the power from the people of Myanmar. Yeah. So this is how we have been seen. So 10 months. Can the military junta succeed? Are they succeeding? No. No way. Instead, they are failing every day. They are dying every day, actually. They are becoming weak and weaker and weaker. So this itself shows that democracy is much, much more powerful than dictatorship. The freedom is much, much more powerful than tyranny. So this is for all of us to see in the real life, in the real times.
I agree. And I think it's a very powerful and a very important message to have. But besides just the conflict here between good and evil and peace versus violence, do you think it's useful for us and useful for the Western world for there to be this sharing of art, for people outside of Myanmar to see and be able to experience and understand Myanmar artists and Myanmar artistic expressions?
I think at the end of the day, it's all about the hope. And the artists drawing or pictures or expressing in music, in whichever way, it will not die. It will be there always. So I think it gives us a hope to the future that no matter what, the end of the day, peace will prevail. No matter what, the end of the day, justice will prevail. And the end of the day, no matter what, the beauty of art will prevail. And the end of the day, the people, peace-loving people will prevail. So I think, in a sense, the moment like this, when the country is going through the darkest moment in history, COVID-19 crisis, violence crisis, humanitarian catastrophe, it's very dim and dark. When I say darkness, that means we can't see that anymore. But the beauty of art and the beauty of future is the promise that we will build the beauty again from the ash of destructions. We will build the opportunity again from the ash of crisis. We will build peace again from the ash of violences. That's the future, and that's the hope, and that's, I think, in many ways, the artists are displacing every day. Like if you listen to the sounds that we all are hearing in the protest, it is the shouting of the hope. Is the end to the military dictatorship. That's the slogan. and ask and demand for their federal democratic future. So that means that that's the desire that will become reality. That's the dream that will become reality. So what I'm saying is the people of Myanmar's dreams will come true. So art itself displays all those, at the same time, it displays what is happening now. But the beauty of it is, it also tells us the hope of the future. And it gives us the hope.
Excellent. And so, Minister, just one final question, and it is a very important question. Of course, this weekend we have an art auction. We're trying to raise money for the people who have been affected by the military, the people who are displaced, the people who have joined the CDM. How important is this? How important is it that we can raise money to help these people?
Number one, it's very important that we are sending the strong message to the people of Myanmar by doing these auctions of arts, that they are not forgotten. So it's very important. And through arts and the work of arts and auctions, we are showing our solidarity with the people of Myanmar. So that itself gives hope to the nation. So I always believe in a value of glass of water. I think there's a really a great value of glass of water. When you think about ocean, you will say, oh, what is the value of glass of water? But in a thirsty moment like this, I think cup of water save life. So I know that in the hearts of the artists and the hearts of the people who evolved this program and art auctions, I just like you all to feel the same. That your actions, your work is much more worth than glass of water. If glass of water save life, these arts and this work and these auctions and these actions save many lives practically. At the same time, it gives hope to the future. So today, we are living for tomorrow. We are working this not only just for today, we are working this for tomorrow as well. And tomorrow, my children, my grandchildren will tell me, what have you done when the people of Myanmar are facing crime against humanity? Have you done anything when Myanmar are in total darknesses? So to me, important thing is, yes, I have done something when there was happening. I was not ignorant. I was not neglecting those crimes. As a human being, is a crime against humanity taking place. As a human being, no matter which country I belong to, as a human being, I have done this as much as I can in my own ability and capacity and power. So I think all of you will be so proud of what you're doing, and I hope and pray so that you will be proud of what you have done today in this time of needs. Finally, it's all about friends in need are friends indeed. The same. Arts in needs are arts indeed. So it's very simple to me. So I salute all of the artists who participated in this program using your arts of work in times of the most needed in my country and people's history. It will not be forgotten. What you have done today will not be forgotten. It is appreciated. And I just like to say again, thank you to all of you from the bottom of my heart, not only on my own behalf, but on behalf of the people of Myanmar as a minister and spokesperson for the nations. Once again, thank you all.
Our final guest today is Emmy Great, a Burmese American drag artist who is contributing a live performance at today's event, which we encourage everybody to watch, and who will open up to us about Myanmar society, the duality and fluidity present in all forms of identity, and her role in helping others find the courage to be themselves and find an emotional home.
So, I was born and raised in Mandalay, Burma. I was there for 18 years, and then I came to the US for college. I went to 2 different liberal arts schools for 5 years, and then I graduated. And since 2016, I've been here in Brooklyn, New York. Let's backtrack. Mandalay, Burma. Both my parents are doctors. They have a small private practice. I have a younger sister.
Okay, so I wanted to ask on that. So you identify as transsexual and as a pansexual drag queen, correct?
Yes. I can elaborate more. So
Please do.
In Burmese culture, the terms gender and sexuality are kind of interchangeable, but in the Western understanding, it's not. And I can elaborate on my own personal experience with gender and sexuality from a Western perspective better. Yes, I am transgender in the fact that I conform to neither strictly male or strictly female in terms of identity. And in terms of sexuality, it's more about like people I'm attracted to and their gender. So in terms of that, anything goes. Usually, especially in the context of Western culture, when people ask me what my gender is, what my sexuality is, I usually say my gender is yes and, which is from improv theater. Are you a man? Yes, and also a woman, and also both and neither. And in terms of sexuality, in terms of people I would have sexual romantic interactions with, I usually say any hole is a goal.
So I would say I've never heard anyone describe it as yes and, but that is both a very nice tongue-in-cheek reference, but also a very effective, I think, shorthand. So I like that. I really like that. But so we can have this conversation. But the question is it as easy to have this sort of a conversation in the Myanmar context?
In the context of Burmese culture and Burmese communities, when it comes to my gender and sexuality, I usually show and not tell. And going back to the idea of saying yes and, which is part of like the improv theater tradition, and the improv theater is kind of also very frequently made fun of among the theater people. So some people would say, if you, I would say something along the lines of like, my gender is yes and, just like improv. If you get too into it, you lose.
Nice. But you mentioned that both of your parents are doctors. And I know that you've said elsewhere that your relationship with your mother is a very important part of your identity and your drag identity and your performance and your art. So I presume from that your relationship, at least with your mother, has not been estranged because of your
No,
identity.
no.
Okay, and that's. Mhm.
Go on.
I was just gonna ask, how is it different from your parents' perspective because they come from a medical science perspective? Does that make them more understanding of your identity than a lot of other people in their context, or does it give it just a different dimension entirely?
I would say no, because when I first came out, the way they reacted was one of prejudice. And even though the medical community is a scientific community, um, science may be facts, but people who interpret them are not. So there are biases. Um, there was some fear about HIV and AIDS, about social class, about transgender or queer. Let's just use the queer umbrella, about how queer people in Burma are a different class that decent people are not supposed to interact with. Why I would want to associate with that. I got those kind of reactions from my parents, but I pretty much followed like the show don't tell method in terms of my gender and sexuality. And I would say they came around not because they are doctors, but because it comes from a place of love. I'm already like halfway around the world, and my parents already knew and accepted that I am operating in a different cultural context than they are capable of understanding. So they stepped back, just watched me from afar, and took their time in coming to understand who I am through what I do and how I get through day-to-day life. Mostly like phone calls once every few weeks and them watching my social media feed.
Okay. It's very interesting. So they sort of, in a sense, they take an active interest. They're not trying to shut it out or pretend that it doesn't exist. It sounds like they're quite accepting.
Yes, they take an active interest, but they had to learn to be passive in their interaction. Like, I'm pretty sure you would be aware in Burmese community, parents tend to be very hands-on with their kids. My parents are extremely that, and because they are doctors and well respected in society, they also have a vision of like, we are doctors and therefore our children should be X, Y, and Z. They had to learn to like let go of that control.
Yes, my mother is a doctor. I sympathize. So, but it sounds like your story with your family is a reasonably successful one. And the unfortunate reality, as we both know, is that for a lot of queer people in the Myanmar context, those stories do not turn out anywhere near as positively. How would you generally sort of summarize the status of queer people in Myanmar culture today?
I don't think I can really speak on that because before I came out, when I was growing up, I never had direct interactions or connections with the queer community. But I only came to like know of queer people existing in Burma after I came out and after I decided to leave the country long term. What was another thought related to that? Not being connected to queer community in Burma, but there were like few queer people that I was connected with, and they were from within the family. I used to have an aunt. Well, she's still alive. I have an aunt who we would call uncle, and she had this lady who was her best friend who would come to her place. She lived with her parents. Would come to see my aunt every morning and would sleep over 3 nights a week. And none of the other aunts liked the lady friend, but it's the aunt's favorite person in the world, and we don't understand why. That's like my interaction with a lesbian or transgender aunt.
So, yeah, so clearly that sort of euphemistic approach to sort of hide these difficult, quote unquote, difficult topics from children. But that's a very interesting one, because my personal experiences in living in Yangon, and I'm not queer, so I don't have the deepest insights, but my experiences were very much that the concept of a biological male identifying as a female was much more. I think people could wrap their heads around that much more than a biological female identifying as a male. That didn't seem to be part of the discourse, or at least I never noticed it to be. So I find it very interesting, the example that you give of your relative.
That's usually the loophole. Burmese people really glorify male and masculinity. So aspiring to be that is no big deal. But if you're already a quote unquote man, why would you want to lower yourself to the position of a woman? But that is the problem.
Okay. So it's just socially codified misogyny that gives you a pass to try and rise above your womanhood to become something greater.
Yeah.
But not the
okay. I want to revisit the opening question about my childhood. I was about to go into the gender roles in the family. That's why I said I'll just dive right into gender. So my mother is disabled. She her right leg is atrophied from polio, which she contracted when she was 18 months old. And she also has post-polio scoliosis. She used to be able to walk, but now she's wheelchair bound. But she is very good with people, and she became the face of the practice that my parents run. And my dad runs like the back end, the bookkeeping, inventory, that kind of stuff, while my mom became the face of the business, and people knew the business as my mom's clinic. So in a sense, my mom, even though she's female and disabled, became the breadwinner figurehead of the family. And I was the firstborn. I was raised, socialized as male. So I did grew up with misogyny around me, but gender roles didn't matter that much to me because I wasn't seeing them enforced that strongly in my family. So when I started experimenting with gender norms, like painting my nails, putting on lipstick, wearing heels, it was kind of like, I'll just explore this. I never felt guilty about it. I would get frustrated when people told me, no, this is wrong, but I don't feel guilty about any of that internally. And my dad, throughout the years, has had some adverse reactions to his status as the male head of the family being undermined. My dad has never beat my mom, but when they would get in arguments and when he would get mad at her, he would just leave the house for 48 to 72 hours, 2 or 3 days, and my mom would be just at home, unable to get to work, which is a weird way of exerting power. I have never talked about this publicly, but here we go. Sorry, Dad. Also, not trying to get him canceled, but it is what it is. It is kind of like the unspoken arrangement that my parents have in their marriage and how they run their business. So that was both a subversion of misogyny and also misogyny in action, both ways. So that's kind of what I grew up seeing. And in terms of sexuality, I used to have crushes on girls in middle school and high school. And I was like, this is fine. And also I was attracted to boys too. And some of my friends were very okay with that because it's genuine adolescent sexual interest. Until some people started putting labels on it, and all of a sudden, oh, a child, maimed, and then they were not okay with that anymore, which is very strange.
Yeah. So I would just like to say, like, on the topic of your parents' interaction, it's something that I've seen manifested in many different forms. And I find it very interesting. Like you talk about this as gender roles, but I feel that society-wide in Myanmar, there is a massive disparity between gender roles as they are codified in speech and gender roles as they play out. There are so many businesses that I've seen, so many families that I've seen, where the woman does the accounting, she does the numbers, she does the more complex tasks of the business. And so many women that I've seen on the street side selling goods all day while their husbands, drink or gamble or things like this. I find it very interesting that there's this culture of saying the men are dominant, but functionally in so many cases, it is actually the women who carry the family unit forward and do all of the really heavy lifting. And men seem to then be upset that they're not doing it. Sorry?
I think the disparity we're seeing comes from the fact that we know gender roles as a Western concept. I think Burmese society has more preoccupation with what is masculine and feminine as qualities rather than roles to fulfill. I'm not sure if that makes sense.
It sort of does. So let me follow here. So if we were to have a woman who is working and bringing money home, would you say that makes the man feel that she's out-masculining him and causes inadequacy? So you mentioned that when you had attraction to boys, that was not a problem until people started putting a label on it. I assume you mean like until people started looking at that and saying, hey, that's gay and this is straight. And until then, nobody really cared. Is that correct?
It was really okay to have curiosities and to explore them. But you're not supposed to get to the point of exchanging notes and going out together, dating. It's supposed to be a phase.
So it's interesting the way that society relates to the gay community. Now, I know that you said that you left the country in 2012 and that you have not returned since then. So
I first came to the U.S. in 2011, and I went back for summer of 2012 after I came out. And that was when I was last there.
Yes. So you've been out of the country for about 9 years.
Yes.
Yes. And you left during the rule of Thein Sein. So quite a lot of political developments have occurred since then. I assume that you are still sort of keeping your finger on the pulse of the Myanmar queer community. Would you say that you've noticed a change in societal attitudes or the bravery with which people can be open?
I don't know about societal attitudes, but the community, the queer community, the LGBT community itself has come out from the shadows because the turn of 2010, I think, kind of marks the opening up of gay culture, I would say. The U.S. was going through a major transition also regarding gay rights, especially gay marriage, leading up to 2015, I believe. I think 2015, June 26th. That was when it became nationwide marriage equality. And also, not just the U.S., all other countries was also making progress with LGBT rights. And Burma was opening up and consuming more international media. So the queer community probably found more of a voice, more people in the media to identify with, even if it's very few. So I don't know who exactly is out and how openly they are out there. But people do seem to be finding more comfort with themselves and expressing it within specific circles.
Anyway, so let me move forward then. So you do a type of art that I think a lot of people are not familiar with. Drag performances, RuPaul's Drag Race obviously has brought a lot of attention to the art form itself. But apart from that, and before that became popular, I don't think a lot of people understood drag as a concept. What is drag to you personally?
I always say, oh, excuse me. Let me turn off my phone. I thought I put it on silent. There we go. I define drag as an art form that uses gender as a medium, but the elaboration on that is in a world where everything and everyone is gendered aggressively, anything can be drag and anyone can do drag.
Interesting.
Something to add on to that is a quote from Stephen Sondheim, which I recently came across because of his recent passing. I just saw this in passing, so I don't know the exact quote, but it goes something along the lines of, art is trying to create some form of order out of chaos. So I would say, like, dealing with gender on a day-to-day basis, even though we are accustomed to it, because of societal expectations and rigid rules, it's exhausting, it's hostile. And doing drag is trying to bring some order and beauty out of that chaos and madness.
I like that. That's very eloquent. So I like this. So you're saying that drag is for everyone. It's not for people who might be transvestites or who might be transgender or who might be queer in some way. You're saying it is an art form for anyone.
Yeah, anyone can do drag. But historically, I would say it belongs to the queer community, because by playing with or breaking rules of gender in specific designated spaces, they've been able to express themselves. So historically, it belongs to the queer people, and historically, these are the people who have championed this art form. But it is for everyone, and anyone can do it. It can be about anything. And people would associate drag with hair, makeup, fashion, performance, mainly because those are the kinds of things we associate the strongest with gender. But really, it can be about anything. And it can incorporate any element.
Interesting. So what does, for you personally, what does drag performance as an art form do for you?
Growing up, I was always fascinated with feminine things. From like the idea of motherhood, given the way my mother raised me and my sister, to the way rich women dress, because that would be like an intersection of gender and class. I would say I get to experiment with and experience different fantasies regarding gender, I would say.
So it's more personal exploration.
Yes. I would say my diva, which a lot of gay people have, like diva that I look up to in terms of like femininity, performance, from Burmese culture, I would say is Nguyen. So when I perform, I sometimes think like, what is it like to be Nui? And also sometimes when I think about relationships, my relationship with other people or people I am mentoring, I think about what is it like to be my mother who had to raise me. What were you going to say?
I was just saying it's very interesting. So you're trying to almost, it sounds like you're trying to channel these people
Yes.
into a manifestation that you present to an audience.
Yes.
That's fascinating. And so that sort of leads on to my other question, because we talk a lot about empathy and we talk a lot about this idea of you don't know what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes, but you should try. It's an important thing to do. And it sounds like from your telling, a lot of drag is basically that. It is the attempt to try and put yourself in somebody else's situation and imagine being that person, the good and the bad. So
for me personally, yes. Other people may approach it differently because their experience of gender in the world would be vastly different from mine.
Of course. But what would you say is the role of drag or the benefit of drag and related types of art? And I think we can call it subversive in a sense. I think drag challenges norms. What is the benefit of these forms of subversive art to society as a whole?
I would say drag is deeply personal, and performance in theater, I would say, is something that takes day-to-day or real world or real life experiences into a very compact package and presents it to an audience. When it is not a group of people like a theater, but when it is one person who is telling their quote unquote gender story, because gender is a part of a lot of elements in day-to-day life. It's a new and different way of looking at existence and experiences, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Because I think we can definitely say that the increased visibility of these sorts of art forms, and not to come back to RuPaul's Drag Race, but it is a very culturally impactful
phenomenon.
It is the one, right? And I think that looking at that, it helps to normalize something. It helps to make it not scary. It helps to humanize it and say, well, these are people. These are just normal people. They have lives and they have jobs and they have responsibilities, and they're decent.
Because you brought up the word normalize, I would like to introduce this conversation that has been happening in activist circles recently. The difference between normalization and destigmatization. So normalization basically means making something normal, widespread, making it everywhere, which is what RuPaul's Drag Race is. But destigmatization is unlearning toxic behavior and attitudes like homophobia and transphobia. How much effort have we put into the destigmatization of queer and transgender identities? Gay people are everywhere now, trans people are everywhere now, but they are still getting murdered.
Yes.
So we still have a long way to go in terms of destigmatization, which should take precedence over normalization. Normalization is kind of easy to exploit for profits in a capitalist society, but destigmatization for utopia.
Yeah. I mean, while you were saying that, the example that came to my mind genuinely was there was a comment that he made when they were launching the new Queer Eye for the Straight Guy. And he said that the original Queer Eye for the Straight Guy was more about just sort of overcoming that initial hurdle, saying like, well, here are gay people, they exist, they're not going to eat you. And the new Queer Eye for the Straight Guy was more a quest for sort of acceptance. And it struck me that when you look at the first season of Queer Eye for the Straight Guy, there was a lot of stereotyping that went on around that show. Carlson became a very sort of strong stereotype of this effeminate gay man. Whereas you look at the new version of Queer for the Straight Guy, it doesn't lean into that thing of, well, this is what an average audience thinks gay people are, so we should just serve that to them. It really just says no. Like what a gay person is just the same as what a straight person is, except there's an element of their life that doesn't affect you anyway, so you don't really need to notice that. There's no sort of, glitter and parades and things like that. They're just, people just like everybody else. So it just made me think of that change in presentation to the broader audience. But
yeah. So in terms of coming, when it comes to acceptance, the narratives can go many different ways. The very base level is gay people are the same as straight people. There's no difference. There's nothing special, which is not true. And they're different, but they're okay. They're different, and it's a good thing. They're different, and that's the thing to celebrate. There are different levels, and the last thing I mentioned should be the goal. But of course, there are a lot of steps to get there.
Yeah. But fortunately, with the increase of this sort of visibility, the increase of these sorts of performative arts, it seems that we are making strong strides in that direction. Definitely in the West, it appears that it's become a very politically popular movement. It's easy to jump on for politicians now. They don't risk losing points because that was what was important to them all along, apparently. But it seems that in the Asian context, it's still a very difficult fight to fight. It's still very hard to win acceptance. And in Myanmar, for example, my understanding is homosexuality is still technically criminal.
So it's Section 377. The law itself rolls gender and sexuality into one. I believe it is sodomy and non-traditional gender expressions. I think those are the two criteria. The punishment, I believe, is 2 years to life in jail. And Section 376 is rape.
I mean, that's the case everywhere. I mean, you look at Uganda, which drew attention for the Kill the Gays bill, but their criminalization of homosexuality is also a British colonial relic. I think a lot of countries didn't actually have issues with homosexuality until Western colonizing powers enforced it.
Everybody has their own understanding and integration of queer people in their society. It goes as far as the Buddhist scriptures and the Hindu scriptures before, but somehow we neglect those two now, or people don't bring those up.
Yeah. So, I mean, because that's very interesting, because we know, for example, that there was a shift when the military took over control, starting from Ne Win's coup in 1962, but more importantly, the Minister of Education, whose name I can't remember, he was also Prime Minister in the 80s for a while. The education reforms really emphasized only those elements of Buddhist scripture which talk about piety and loyalty and obedience and humility. And they de-emphasized anything that could trigger independent thought or questioning the righteousness of authority and military power. So it's not surprising to me that they would have consciously removed the more tolerant and accepting passages from discourse.
I am going to go on a wild tangent because you brought up the culture of dominant patriarchy in the Burmese culture. I have been listening to the Burmese version of Creepypasta on YouTube, which is just like supernatural stories from Burma that are narrated narrated by YouTubers. I listen to them while I do makeup, and one thing I find time and time again in those stories is if there is a particular demon or a witch or a ghost that is on the loose, you never take care of it yourself. You go to an authority figure who's in charge of that. You always go to an authority figure, and there is always a higher power, and you are always supposed to report to them. And that got me wondering, this is how dictatorship thrives. How did this start? Did they design it into like the psyche of the Burmese people since the 60s? Or has it been a thing since before the British? And how long is this going to go on?
I mean, that's I had no idea about that. But it strikes me as something that definitely would have been conscious. I listened to a PhD thesis from a researcher who had gone to Thailand and spoken to teachers who had fled over the border. And what she had found was that a lot of these teachers were being forced by the military to teach, the scriptures that I said, the loyalty and obedience and humility. But because the Buddhist scripture is a very complex language, she said that they were actually teaching it in a way that they were trying to use these scriptures that they were forced to teach, but asking questions about them because the language was so complex the children couldn't understand it. They were using it to guide children towards these conclusions of questioning authority, or is this moral, or is this how we should interpret the text, and things like this. But it was very clear that this idea of there is someone above you, your job is to shut up and wait for them to tell you what to do, that was very deliberately being hammered in from a very early age in the school system. So it's a little bit horrifying that it's extended so far as to affect newly created art forms as a foregone conclusion that, oh, yeah, no, there's someone else, we'll go there. That's horrifying, actually, to me.
I don't know if or how this shows up in other genres of writing, but in like Burmese horror genre, in the supernatural genre, it is the backbone.
Wow.
Like the stories only vary in like how they get there, and that's the interesting part. The story structure is like something happens, we find out what's wrong, we find the authority, you get there, the authority takes care of it.
Wow. And you compare that to the West, where, our children's tales have, crazed woodcutters coming into grandmother's house to cut the wolf open and free grandma, or just, children that taking it upon themselves to throw a witch into the oven and save their lives. That's normal. And then we look at TV shows like Supernatural, where you've just got two brothers, completely criminal, surviving off credit card scams, going around the country, solving problems because they can. It's such a stark contrast. Who's the hero figure here?
It may go as far back as Confucius. Wow. Because his teachings also has like the very structural thing of your parents are priority, your role in society is priority, and all you have to do on top of it, the cherry on top is, yes, you are but one piece in this society, and the cherry on top is there is one person at the very top who is in charge of everything. You don't have to worry.
Confucius was special. Did Confucius have much of an impact on Burmese society, though?
I would say so.
Wow.
This is the default answer that I give when people ask me, so what's Burma like? I would always answer, it is the only country on the Indochina Peninsula that is in contact with both India and China. So every cultural thing you can experience would be a combination of the two. I would say Buddhism really came from Nepal, from the India side, and Confucian ideas came from China. So I would say, yeah.
Wow. Because, Confucius, I suspect, and I know other people who suspect, that Confucius, based on his writings, suffered from some variety of autism spectrum disorder. Very, very strong desire for everything to be codified, defined, arranged within a system, and for the rules of that system to be incredibly rigid and respected. And that's fine when you're organizing your bedroom. A little bit less fine when you're trying to run a state, and when people's lives depend on, how many rows of dancers are permitted to perform at the court of lesser nobles and things like this. So, yes, if Confucianism influenced Myanmar culture, then definitely that would have been at least one of the important geneses of the current situation that we see. But yeah, it's still very strange. I find Burmese people are still very independent in a lot of ways. A lot of Burmese people don't wait around for authority and people to say, "Oh, this is what you should do." There's a strong willingness to just do the thing.
Which also ties us back into the current revolution, because because in terms of the pro-democracy movement, we've always waited on Aung San Suu Kyi.
Yes.
This is the first time we're acting on our own without her. And I'm kind of proud of the people for that.
Absolutely. And I think it's important for a democracy to not invest everything in one person. There are too many systems that do that, and then they eventually fall. It's important for the people to take power themselves.
I have a suspicion that for a lot of Burmese people, they are still doing that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there are people who still have absolute faith and would like to wait on Aung San Suu Kyi for where we go next.
I mean, yes, but she's in detention and the military is not waiting around. So, yeah, things have to happen. This is definitely a discussion that I've had with a lot of people. It's definitely coming in very frequently. With the trial coming up, we know Aung San Suu Kyi's verdict has been deferred until the 6th. But the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of people are coming around to the idea that Aung San Suu Kyi has done a lot for the country. She's done a lot for the pro-democracy movement. She's outstanding in terms of the achievements that she's brought for her people. But at the same time, she can't single-handedly hold the reins of government and hold off the military. It's just not realistic.
Yeah.
The state needs to move forward one way or another. And yeah, I think it's important for us to have those discussions. And ask those questions.
This is also another tangent, because we have brought Aung San Suu Kyi into the conversation. The struggle for democracy in Burma since the first coup, I would say, or since the first coup, not the first coup, since 88, I would say, has been the weird sibling rivalry between the two children of Aung San Suu Kyi, and the military. And this also came up while I was listening to these Burmese supernatural stories. So the specific date, the 4th of January in 1948, was chosen because the stars are aligned in a way that would make the military strong for the next century or something.
I mean, then again, numerology has not always worked for the military. We remember Ne Win changing the currency to a 9-based system because that was more lucky for him. Yeah, so I mean that some of the numerology, but so here's the thing: the military continues, and the numerology continues. I mean, I'm convinced that the attacks that we saw on the 3rd of March was specifically chosen because 3321 has a repetition of numbers and it adds up to 9. And we saw widespread crackdowns, indiscriminate murder. We've seen some of the most horrendous violence. This current conflict in Myanmar is the longest lasting internal conflict, if you don't count the on and off civil wars between the military and ethnic group and the EAOs. But apart from that, this is longer than the Saffron Revolution. This is longer than the 1988 revolution. And the death toll is also higher, even by the military's own estimates, which are very low estimates, it has to be said. And one thing that really I don't know. It gives me a bit of hope, because I know that homophobia is alive and well in the country. But the queer community during the protests were very much front and center. We had drag queens in full costume on the streets protesting. You had, gay communities with pride flags. You had all of these things. And my question is sort of a combination. Is number one, what role does your art form have in times of crisis? But number two, what impact do you think this revolution is going to have, and these ongoing actions are going to have, and the visibility of the queer community during them is going to have on the acceptance of the queer community going forward?
First off, shout out to the LGBT union in Mandalay for being front and center and leading the protest. I am really proud of the queer people from my hometown.
With regard to performative art such as drag, what role does that have, and what role can that play in times of great turmoil like this?
I think it can be a source of strength and inspiration. From my personal experience, I have always been politically engaged more or less in my performances because my existence is very politicized, even here in the US. And before 2016, everybody was absolutely certain that Hillary Clinton was going to be the next president of the United States. So whenever I would bring up issues, her answer would always be, it will be fine under Clinton. But after the results of the 2016 election came out, everybody started freaking out and wanted to be political. And the narratives started becoming orange man equals bad. And my analysis of that was, this isn't taking us anywhere. We've known that orange man equals bad for a while now, but we're here. Let's talk about, where do we go here? Things to look forward to, how we can fight right now, what to look forward to in the future. So the narratives in my work, even though they are political, it started shifting. I started doing more things, more performances or narratives where I can tell the people, hey, you're feeling bad, but there are things to be thankful for, be happy about, and look forward to. I think performing arts can be a source of that. Also in good times, if times are not bad, in good times, it can also be a reminder to people to examine things they take for granted. This kind of goes back to the idea of drag challenging norms. Things people would not usually look at. Because nobody needs to put that much hair and makeup on. If you're putting on that much hair and makeup and outfits, do you have something important to say? I want to listen to you. It can be an entry point like that.
Okay.
So that was the answer to the first question, but I think it kind of also touches on the second one.
Definitely. So what do you think is the impact of this? Like, do you think, for example, that during the coup and the upheaval, there is an opportunity to not just break down the norm that the military rules the country, but also the norm that men dominate women and that gay people are somehow lesser?
Yes. Also because this is the first time I have heard in the revolutions or like the fight against the military, people talking not just about we need democracy and not the military, which has always been the MO. This time people are talking about, we have wronged the ethnic groups over the past few centuries. How do we make up for it?
Yes.
And they're actively working on it. And also women's rights. Women have been on the front lines, and also queer people. And even more recent than queer people's revolution, I would say, is the working class revolution, because Burma has been going through industrialization, I would say. We've had factories for a while, but like foreign investment is finally coming in, and we're having a larger workforce that's dealing not just with internal affairs, but also international economics. Garment Workers Union is at the front lines. So the people who have nothing to lose but everything to gain are on the front line, and they control the narrative, and they're being seen and heard. And I hope the result of the revolution will do right by those people. And I had one more thought. And the general public getting to see these people march on the front lines makes them recognize their humanity, makes people recognize their humanity. They have their own needs and wants, and they're willing to express them and risk their lives with them. You shouldn't have to prove that much to be recognized. Sorry, why am I shaking that pen? You don't have to go to the front lines to be recognized as human, but it is what it took, and it's finally happening, and I hope it'll stay.
You've been listening to the Insight Myanmar podcast. We'd appreciate it very much if you could rate, review, and/or share this podcast. Every little bit of feedback helps. You can also subscribe to the Insight Myanmar podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever else you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss any of our upcoming episodes. If you can't find our feed on your podcast player, please just let us know and we'll ensure it can be offered there in the future. Also, make sure to check out our website for a list of our complete episodes, including additional text, videos, and other information available at insightmyanmar.org. And I also invite you to take a look at our new nonprofit organization at betterburma.org. There was certainly a lot to talk about in this episode, and we'd like to encourage listeners to keep the discussion going. Make a post, request specific questions, and join in on discussions currently going on the Insight Myanmar podcast Facebook group. You're also most welcome to follow our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter accounts by the same name. If you're not on social media, feel free to message us directly at info@insightmyanmar.org. Or if you'd like to start up a discussion group on another platform, let us know and we can share that forum here. Finally, we're open to suggestions about guests or topics for future episodes. So if you have someone or something in mind, please do be in touch. We would like to take this time to thank everyone who made this podcast possible. Currently, our team consists of 2 sound engineers, Mike Bink and Martin Combs. There's of course Zach Hessler, content collaborator and part-time co-host. Ken Pransky helps with editing, and a special Mongolian volunteer who is asked to remain anonymous does our social media templates. In light of the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, a number of volunteers have stepped in to lend a hand as well, and so we'd like to take this time to appreciate their effort in our time of need. And we're always on the lookout for more volunteers during this critical time, so if you'd like to contribute, definitely let us know. We'd also like to thank everyone who has assisted us in arranging for the guests we've interviewed so far. And of course, we send a big thank you to the guests themselves for agreeing to come on and share such personal, powerful stories. Finally, we're immensely grateful for the donors who made this entire thing possible. We want to remind our listeners that the opinions expressed by our guests are their own and don't necessarily reflect the host or other podcast contributors. Please also note that as we are mainly a volunteer team, we do not have the capacity to fact-check our guest interviews. By virtue of being invited on our show, there's a trust that they will be truthful and not misrepresent themselves or others. If you have any concerns about the statements made on this or other shows, please contact us. This recording is the exclusive right of Insight Myanmar podcast and may not be used without the expressed written permission of the podcast owner, which includes video, audio, written transcripts, or excerpts of any episodes. Also not meant to be used for commercial purposes. On the other hand, we're very open to collaboration, so if you have a particular idea in mind for sharing any of our podcasts or podcast-related information, please feel free to contact us with your proposal. If you would like to support our mission, we welcome your contribution. During this time of crisis, all donations now go towards supporting the protest movement in Myanmar through our new nonprofit, Better Burma. You may give by searching Better Burma on PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, GoFundMe, and Patreon, as well as via credit card at betterburma.org/donation. You can also give right on our Insight Myanmar website, as all donations given there are directed towards the same fund. And with that, we're off to work on the next show, so see you next episode.